Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of RC Classic Garage and episode 17 on the Alfa GTV barn find restoration. Now, if you've been following this series, you'll know that we dragged this car out of a barn in April, and we have been bringing it back to life right here on the channel. And today is a huge milestone because after 7 months of stripping, grinding, cutting, welding, one rusty panel at a time, this is the moment the Alfa Romeo starts looking like a complete car again. Well, at least as a complete body shell. So in this episode, we'll be welding the front wings into their final position. We'll be perfecting door gaps and doing all the final bits of welding. We'll also be dropping the front and rear suspension and prepping under the car ready for paint and stripping the engine bay back to bare metal. So with a lot of work to do, as always, let's get into it. Now in the last episode, we finally got the front wings sitting exactly where they needed to be. That meant lining them up with both doors, lining them up with the front valance, and making sure the bonnet gap was absolutely perfect. It's one of those moments in the restoration where everything needs to sit just right, because every small adjustment here affects the final geometry of the front end. So, after a lot of trial fitting, measuring, adjusting, and standing back with a cup of tea, we got them to a point where we were really happy with them. So now it's time to move on to final welding. We started with the right wing. The first welds run across the top edge right up against the windscreen frame. From here, Paul moved down the water channel, putting a series of plug welds. Each weld ties the outer wing to the inner structure. And it's not just held on at the edges, it's a whole seam, and it becomes one piece of solid metal. And as always, once welded, straight on with the grinder to flatten everything down. The idea is to erase every trace of the welds, leaving it smooth and a clean finish. With the right wing done, it's time to move on to the left, and it's exactly the same process. Top weld across the windscreen, plug welds down the water channel, taking your time to make sure that everything is tight, straight and strong, and then grinding back until you never know it was ever done before. It's a long, repetitive process, but this is where the right mock-up at the beginning becomes permanent, and these wings are now part of the car. They're fully welded, fully bonded, and they're onto the body. There's definitely no going back now. With both wings now fully welded along the windscreen edge and down the water channels, it's time to move to the front of the car and tie everything together. So next up is welding the front wings to the front valance. But before we commit to the long welding and grinding process, there's a small repair that needs to happen on the inner corner where the wing meets the valance. And this is where Paul's craftsmanship really shows. He starts by making a perfect patch panel, shaping it to match that corner. Then the old bit gets cut out cleanly, the new plate goes in, and he welds it into place before grinding it back smoothly. Now what I love here is the attention to detail. Paul is always thinking ahead to the bodywork stage. He makes sure that the panel sits just slightly lower than the surrounding metal. That gives the bodywork guy the room they need for the skimmer filler. If it sits proud of the panel, you'll be fighting it later, and the final finish will never be quite right. So with that repair done, we're ready to move on to the main job, welding the wings to the valance and turning this front end into one solid piece of metal again. The next stage is serious welding and grinding. There are long welds that run down the side of the wing and into the front valance. These aren't just a couple of tacks, they're continuous welding all the way along the seam, and every inch needs to be cut, aligned together, welded, cleaned up, and ground back on both sides. We then move on to the headlight frames. They need to be perfectly aligned to the new panels. Paul constantly checks the fit, adjusting and correcting as he works his way around the front end. It's a slow process. Weld a section, let the metal cool, grind it smooth, and repeat. But that's how you avoid warping the panels and keep everything straight. Eventually, after hours of welding, grinding, shaping, and cleaning, everything is tied together, and the transformation is amazing. the front end goes from feeling like a collection of loose panels held in place to one solid structural piece of the car. You can actually feel how it all locks together. The wings, the valance, the headlight section, forming something strong and rigid. We move on to one of the most satisfying parts of the restoration, welding the wings inside the door area and then creating absolutely perfect door gaps. This is where the craftsmanship really shows. So first step, door comes off. Paul needs full access to the inner wing and A-pillar. He starts by welding the inside edge of the wing directly to the A-pillar seam, creating a strong bond that should have been there from the start. Now if you remember earlier in the series, I mentioned this car had been in an accident many years ago. Whoever did the wing replacement back then didn't actually weld it to the A-pillar. Once it is fully welded, Paul grinds everything back smooth. And only after that is finished, the real fun begins. Door gaps. The door goes back on, then comes off again, then back on again. You'll see this happening a lot because getting the perfect door gap is all about tiny adjustments. We're talking about 1 millimeter here, 0.5 millimeter there. And Paul uses a combination of grinding the edge of the door and sometimes welding a thin strip of metal along the door or the wing, and then shaping it until the gap is dead even all the way around. It's slow, methodical work. Weld, cool, grind, test fit, repeat. But the goal isn't just a nice gap. It's to make sure the flow of the entire car is right. The line from the front wing through the door into the rear quarter panel has to look like one continuous line. If the door is even slightly out, you'll break the shape of the car. Once Paul's happy with the line, the gap around the door is measured to within an inch of its life. Top edge, bottom edge, middle, front, rear. Paul checks every section over and over until he's totally happy. And when he's happy, the result is outstanding. This is one of those details you might not notice at first glance, but when it's wrong, it ruins the car. And when it's right, the whole shape just sings. And now, with the door gaps absolutely perfect and the lines flowing exactly the way Paul wants them, it's time for the final piece of the puzzle on this side, the lower section of the wing. It's the last structural weld on the driver's side, prying the wing to the sill area and completing all the repairs around the door opening. And that's the welding and gapping done on this side of the car. The result, near enough perfect and a world away from where we started. With the driver's side finished, it's time to move to the passenger side and repeat the entire process. The door goes on, comes off, and over again. Measuring the gap, trimming a little metal, welding a little back on, grind it smooth, and keep checking until the lines flow perfectly from the front wing, across the door, and into the rear of the car. And for anybody wondering about the time involved, welding and grinding both wings, tying in the front valance, and getting the door gaps right was 4 full days of work. 4 days of constant welding, grinding, measuring, and adjusting. And just when we thought the welding was finally over, we get one last surprise. This is the replacement bonnet I bought after sandblasting absolutely killed the original one. Now Paul has a talent for spotting rust before anyone else can even see a stain. He can smell it from a mile away. And sure enough, in the corner, right at the top of this bonnet, he found a section he was not happy with. Now to fix it properly, he has to cut into both the frame and the outer skin. So first the frame. He cuts out the damaged corner. And thank goodness, the same section on the original bonnet was solid. So we cut that piece out and use as a replacement section. So we're repairing the new bonnet with some original bonnet metal, a bit of recycling. Then Paul moves on to the outer skin. Now he can't just patch this, he needs to shape the panel with both a curve and a bend. So he makes a template, checks the fit, adjusts it, checks it again, and then hand forms a brand new corner section. It's really skillful bit of work, and you can see the patience involved to get the shape exactly right. Once he's happy with the templates, he cuts away the bad outer skin. The replacement frame goes on first, fully welded and ground back smooth. He coats it with weld-through primer to protect it from the inside, and then positions the outer skin section over the edge. To double check alignment, he measures the bonnet against the scuttle panel. Then the scuttle panel goes back onto the car, the bonnet gets a test fit, and after a triple check, literally, Paul is finally happy. So he welds in the new outer corner, grinds it back clean, and finishes it with rust preventative undercoat. And I'm very happy to say, that's it for the welding on this job. You might remember early in the series, I said I hope to do this as a rolling restoration. And I think it's fair to say this has turned into the biggest case of project creep of my entire life. Every classic car owner knows how it goes. One job leads to another, then another, and before you know it, the car is completely stripped. So it'll be no surprise when I say we're now removing the suspension. The plan is simple. Well, simple on paper. We're taking the suspension out so that we can clean the entire underside of the car properly and coat it in wrapped aligner. While it's out, all of the suspension will be rebuilt with something really special, which I'll reveal soon. Then once the underside is painted and protected, the whole rebuilt suspension will go back in, hopefully looking as good as the rest of the work we've just completed. Well, that's the theory anyway. So we can start with the rear suspension. Removing it is actually a pretty painless process, mainly because I had the entire underside ice blasted earlier in the restoration. So everything under here is clean, exposed, and easy to get to. No 50-year-old grease, no mud, just a few rusted bolts. So once everything's unbolted, it's a simple case of lowering the diff onto my pallet with wheels. I use this for rebuilding suspension components. You can drag it around the workshop, tuck it under a bench, spin it around while you're working on it. It makes life so much easier when you're working on heavy bits like a rear suspension. With the rear axle out of the way, we move straight on to removing the rear stabilizing bar and the rear shocks. And that part is fairly straightforward. But then we get to the rear straps, and they really put up a fight. They're held on with 2 screws. And yes, you heard that correctly, Phillips head screws. And of course, after being in place for decades, they completely rusted solid. There was no chance that they were backing out nicely. So the only realistic way to get them out is to cut through the straps and the screws together. Once the straps and plates are off the car, we're left with the exposed screws, still stuck in the body. And at that point, it's all about heat, leverage, vice grips, a torch, and patience. And I'm happy to say it worked, and the rear end is now fully stripped and ready for cleaning underneath. And now we move on to front suspension. First job is to release the steering tie rod end, then remove the front shock and get it out of the way. After that, it's time to deal with the front spring. Now I use the threaded rod method for this. I remove one of the base plate bolts and replace it with a long threaded rod, bolting it up tight. I then do the same with 2 more bolts, so I've got 3 threaded rods holding the base plate in position. Once those are in place, I remove the 4th bolt completely. Now it's all about control. I start releasing each threaded rod in turn, a little at a time, lowering the base plate and taking the tension off the spring gradually. No drama, no flying parts, just controlled pressure coming off the spring. With the spring and base plate safely out, the rest of the front suspension comes apart surprisingly easily. There is 1 main bolt in the engine bay, and 4 bolts holding the base of the suspension to the chassis. Once those are cracked loose and removed, the entire front hub assembly can drop out as one complete unit. And once the suspension is out of the way, we move on to the long, tedious part, stripping the underside. It's hours of work, heat stripping the old paint, scraping off underseal, and cleaning everything back to bare metal. It's not glamorous, and it's certainly not quick. Once the metal is clean, we treat every inch in Ruscular and Converter. That neutralizes any microscopic rust still hiding in the pores of the steel and stops it from coming back years down the line. When that's cured, the whole underside gets a full coat of grey primer to seal the metal properly. Then it's time for the seam sealer. It's slow, it's messy, but it's how you future-proof a classic. And while all that's happening underneath the car, I've been doing the same in the engine bay over the last few weeks. All the old paint and underseal is stripped back, right down to bare metal. It's slow, detailed work around the factory seams and brackets. But once the engine bay is clean, I treated everything with rust converter, just like the underside. So now the engine bay is in bare metal, protected and ready for primer. Let's take a step back and look at the progress so far. Engine bay in bare metal, all the metalwork is done with solid lines, really good door gaps, and underneath the car has been cleaned, prepped, primed and sealed. It's been a huge amount of work, but the body shell is straight, solid and fully prepped, ready for the next stage. Now we have hit a really big milestone in this restoration. The metalwork is finally done, and it was far more work than I ever imagined. The restoration has also gone a lot further than I thought it would. Now this car is booked in with Keith at Painting Classic Cars in February next year, and we're at the beginning of December. And I have only 1 week to work in December because I'm going to South Africa for 3 weeks. So in that week, I hope to raptor the under the car, get into the engine bay, get that into undercoat, and get that painted. Now a lot of you have been asking about filler work. Well, the guys at Painting Classic Cars will be doing all the filler work because they will be taking this car back down to metal when it gets there. We're just putting a light coat of rust preventative undercoat on here to stop flash rusting. But when it goes down to them, they'll be removing it, it'll go down to bare metal, they'll be doing all the filler work ahead of the painting. Now when I get back from South Africa, I literally have 5 weeks to rebuild the suspension and get it back into the car. Speaking of which, I have some exciting boxes that have just arrived from Veloci Sport. Let's open them. This is the Veloci Sport Fast Road Suspension Upgrade Kit. It comes with upgraded bushers, lower springs, Coney shocks, adjustable arms, an upgraded stabilizing bar and drop links. And to match, an entire new braking system. New calipers, new discs, new master cylinder, 2 new servos and all new brake pipes. It will completely transform the handling of the car. It will sharpen it up, make it more planted, but also retain comfort. And have great braking to go with it. So guys, lots of exciting content to come as we paint underneath the car, paint the engine bay, rebuild the suspension and get it back in. Guys, I really do enjoy your comments that you write on the video. They are so supportive and I read every single one of them and they help me going. So thanks very much. I hope you have enjoyed the episode. Please give it a like and see you all next time. Ciao.